Particularly crazy when you have people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who has thrown out what she calls a Green New Deal. Okay, her Green New Deal document that she put out yesterday is fully crazy. It's the text of a proposed House rule change outlining a plan, her Green New Deal. Now, the reason that we bring up Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, this is always what I caveat with. We're not bringing her up because we think she's an inherently important person. Okay, she's a woman who won 12,000 votes in a heavy Democrat district in a primary that was majority minority and had a white representative, and they threw him out in favor of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. This was not some sort of great puzzle. This is not some sort of massive movement inside the American public, but she has been touted by the media as a leader in the Democratic Party. Okay, it's not my fault that the media decided to choose a complete ignoramus as the face of the new Democratic Party. It's not my fault. Okay, that's the fault of the Democrats and the fault of the media. And that means that it is now incumbent on us to take whatever crazy ideas she has seriously. Now, listen, I'll admit that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is a good dancer. There's this video that came out of her yesterday dancing on top of a rooftop. And for some reason, I guess there wasn't anybody on the right that I saw who was upset about this. We all thought, oh, this is kind of charming and fun. There was one person on Twitter who said, this just shows Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is privileged or something. And everybody came down on this person so hard that they actually left Twitter. The media played it as though conservatives were scolding her over her dancing. I don't care that she's dancing. She seems like a pretty good dancer, right? I mean, here's the video of her dancing on a rooftop, basically reenacting one of the kind of montages from The Breakfast Club. But it's cute and it's funny. It's nice. I mean, who cares? Like, here, we can show it. Here she is dancing. Just dancing around, right? Just cute girl dancing around. All right. Well, it turns out she is significantly better at dancing than she is at economics. Now, if you asked me to take her seriously as a dancer, I'd be like, okay, this video is important. But this video isn't important. Okay, the part that's important is that she doesn't know anything about economics, and she says crazy crap all the time. And that's what the new Democratic Party is. What they want you to see is the fun girl dancing and being Alex from the Bronx or whatever she calls herself. What she actually is a crazy loonbag socialist. She was a member of the Democratic Socialists of America. Okay, and now, here are the details of her Green New Deal that she put out. Okay, this is nuts. Here's what she says. This is according to Tom Elliott over at Grabien.com. The proposed rule change for the upcoming 116th Congress would require the creation of a select committee for a Green Deal that would be responsible for creating a plan by January 1st, 2020, with corresponding draft legislation soon after. The text of the rule change lays out the committee's jurisdiction and required areas of action. Its scope and mandate for legislative authority amounts to a radical grant of power to Washington over Americans' lives, homes, businesses, travel, banking, and more. So what exactly are they looking for? What is she looking for? Their goal is to meet 100% of national power demand through renewable sources. Okay, by like 2020 or by 2030. By 2030, she wants 100% renewable power sources crammed down by government. Let me explain how insane this is off the top of it. Okay, here is America's energy consumption by energy source for 2017, which is the latest data available. 37% of America's energy consumption came in the form of petroleum. Another 29% came in the form of natural gas. Another 14% came in the form of coal. Another 9% came in the form of nuclear electric power, which the Democrats don't like. 11% of America's energy supply came from renewable energy. So in other words, the growth of America's economy, the growth of the world economy, which is dependent on the growth of America's economy, is powered 89% by sources of energy that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez doesn't like. She doesn't like nuclear energy, so we're not going to count that, even though that really is a pretty clean source of energy, right? France is basically run on nuclear energy. Okay, it's just ridiculous. And by the way, even when we talk about renewable energy, okay, wood constitutes 19% of that. Okay, so that's not quite as renewable as people want. And that has carbon emissions. When you use wood for fuel, that actually does have carbon emissions. Solar represents 6% of the 11% that is renewable energy. Wind represents 21% of the 11%. In other words, solar and wind and hydroelectric represent something like 5% of the total energy supply of the United States. She wants it to be 100% by 2030. How is that going to happen? Through massive taxation and quashing of the American economy. And that's how it's going to happen. But it doesn't stop there. The document also states that the Green New Deal will advance non-environmental projects such as social, economic, racial, regional, and gender-based justice. What a Green New Deal has to do with gender-based justice is beyond me. I don't know what the hell that's even supposed to mean. Doesn't matter. She says that we should have a national energy-efficient smart grid. I'd like her to design it, right? Since she's obviously an expert in energy management, more so than people in coal and natural gas and petroleum. Probably she should design it, right? I mean, she's a government expert. She was bartending until 5 seconds ago. But clearly, if there's one person who knows how to build a national energy-efficient smart grid, and that's not just a mashup of a bunch of words that sound nice together, it would be somebody like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, whose combined brain power could maybe provide the electricity to lightly toast a piece of bread. Right? As long as we're talking about people providing renewable sources of energy. I'll get to more on Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's idiotic plans. All the Democrats had to do was not be crazy. But AOC's grand new deal. And again, the reason we're talking about this is because she is the fresh new face. I was encouraged by a friend of mine on Twitter who's a professor of policy. I believe it's over at Yale. His name is Howard Foreman. He's a health policy and economic policy advisor. You know, he says, well, why don't you just pay attention? Why don't you just pay attention to the more moderates in the Democratic caucus? Because the media is not. Okay, because the Democrats are not. Because AOC is on 60 Minutes this Sunday. That's why. Okay, so I'm going to go through the rest of her plan, and then I will tell you how she plans to pay for all of this. So she says we should upgrade every residential and industrial building for state-of-the-art energy-efficient comfort and safety. That's not going to cost any money. We're going to retrofit every building in the United States with all this stuff. Eliminating greenhouse gas emissions for manufacturing, agriculture, and other industries. How? You know, how is a good question. It's a really useful question. How? Why? Right? These are useful questions in politics. She says funding massive investment in reducing existing greenhouse gases. But that's not all. The proposed committee would also have seeming total oversight of American industry with a mandate for pushing union membership. So it's not just that we are going to green the economy through the force of government. We are going to unionize every industry to green the economy through the force of government. If this sounds a lot like the government controlling industry from the top down and destroying the economy, that's because it's precisely what it is. She wants a national jobs force to help people participate in the transition to the green economy. She says the Green New Deal will provide all members of our society across all regions and all communities the opportunity, training, and education to be a full and equal participant in the transition, including through a job guarantee program to assure a living wage job to every person who wants one. So let me get this straight. We could have the government take over all the industries and regulate them down to the ground, unionize all the industries, guarantee the employment through all the industries, and redistribute income for gender-based justice through all of this. Have we ever tried anything like this before in human history? Yes. Has it worked out super well? No. It turns out people like their property. It turns out that people are fans of being able to create. People like being entrepreneurs. People like working in creative areas. People like freedom. Freedom is a nice thing. And beyond that, obviously, this is going to destroy the economy. I mean, it's just immoral for her to suggest that innovation is dying, and therefore we have to cram it. What has she ever invented? Has she invented a thing? I mean, granted, she does Instagram instant pot cooking lessons. Ooh. But has she ever created a job? Has she ever hired anyone? You know, not with government money at her congressional office, but an actual job. Has she ever produced a product or a good or a service anyone wanted to buy? And yet she's going to be running the economy. Perfect. Also, she says that the plan includes fail-safes in the form of income, universal income, and Medicare for all. Those are the side projects that they're going to be working on in their spare time. Universal income and Medicare for all. Yeah, this isn't going to go wrong in any way. So Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez puts out this plan, and then she's asked, she's on 60 Minutes. Remember, she is the new face. She's the new face. Not my fault. You picked her, morons. Okay, so she's the new face. Okay, I'm not going to... Okay, so and here's what she says. She is asked, so how are you going to pay for all of this? Her answer, of course, is we are going to raise taxes massively on the rich. Here is her dumb answer. Again, much better at dancing than economics, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Sometimes you see tax rates as high as 60 or 70%. That doesn't mean all $10 million are taxed at an extremely high rate, but it means that as you climb up this ladder, you should be contributing more.
What you are talking about, just big picture, is a radical agenda compared to the way politics is done right now. Do you call yourself a radical?
Yeah, if that's what radical means, call me a radical.
Okay, well, I will. You're a radical. You're an insane radical. And when she says, thanks for explaining marginal tax rates to me, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Now, what would be awesome is if she explained how much money the people in the top quintile of the United States pay in federal income tax. Okay, here is the latest statistic. This is from April of 2018. Okay, for 2018, the reality is that top earners will pay the overwhelming majority of all taxes in the United States. Houses in the top 20% will have income of about $150,000 or more, and 52% of total income. They will pay 87% of all income taxes. 87% of all income taxes are paid for by the people in the top 20% of income earners. But by the way, it's worth noting here that America has the most progressive tax system in the entire industrialized world. Okay, that if you're, and when I say progressive, I mean the more money you make, the more money you pay. This is truer in America than it is in any of the European countries that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is talking about. The reality is that in order to pay for all of her god-awful, terrible, regulatory, economy-crushing programs, she would have to raise taxes radically on people who are lower down on the income scale. And when you hear people like Bernie Sanders say things like, well, back in the day of JFK, the top marginal tax rate was 91%. Why cannot we do that now? A few quick notes about this idiotic point. Number one, the top marginal tax rates in the day of Eisenhower and JFK was indeed 91%. But that was for people who earned, filing jointly, $3.4 million in inflation-adjusted dollars. The top marginal tax rate in the United States today kicks in at about $400,000. Okay, so not the same thing. Two, even that 91% top marginal tax rate was never paid for by anyone. The effective tax rate for people making that amount of money in 1955 was about 45%. Why? Because everybody was shielding their income because of the lower corporate tax rate, and also because until at that point you were actually allowed to deduct on your taxes depreciation on all loans and depreciation on all real estate. So people just weren't paying that tax rate is the reality. And the economy was good because people weren't actually paying that tax rate. For every year between 1952 and 2014, the government brought in between 17 and 20% of GDP in tax revenue and between 7 and 9% of GDP in income tax revenue. So it's just a lie to suggest that taxes used to be so high and the economy was awesome when the taxes were super duper high. People just weren't paying them. They just were not paying them. If you really believe that you can do this to the tax rates and that magically everything will be okay, you're an idiot.